Welcome to the Connect with BMC Helix ITSM webinar series. During today's event, you're able to ask questions of our panelists. The questions and answers, along with this webinar recording, will be published to our YouTube channel a week from today's event. Our topic today is BCM Access Administration Best Practices, and Cynthia will take us through this content. Over to you, Cynthia.
Thank you, Rick, for the introduction, and thank you everyone for joining the webinar. My name is Cynthia, and I'm the Staff Specialist Technical Support Analyst working with BMC Client Management Product. In today's webinar, we will share an overview of BMC Client Management Product and discuss details about administrator, administrator group, and syncing these administrator with the help of directory server. We would also give demos and share scenarios covering these topics. And towards the end of the webinar, we will cover different troubleshooting scenarios and share references as well. So let's get started. BMC Client Management is an automated endpoint management solution that helps us with different features. It helps us discover assets in our environment and collect inventory for not only Windows devices, but also for Mac, Linux, printers, and other network devices like routers and switches. Now with the device management feature, one can install agent to different devices like Windows clients, Windows servers, Mac devices, or even Linux devices and perform some advanced tasks on those devices and collect inventory from them as well. With the help of OS deployment feature, one could deploy an OS to a bare metal device. You could also deploy application to the end devices with the help of custom package solution that is available in the application deployment feature of BCM. With software license management, the day-to-day work of managing the licenses or keeping the inventory of the licenses becomes very easy. Now, when an agent is deployed to a device, it collects inventory for everything: hardware inventory, software inventory, patch inventory, and security inventory. The software inventory will help you understand if the application that is installed is licensed or not, and will give you an overview with the help of a dashboard, sharing details of the devices if they are compliant or not. BCM also offers different out-of-box compliance rules against which devices could be evaluated and custom compliance rules could be created. Patch management feature, which not only helps you install the patches for Windows or Microsoft, but also patches for other products like Adobe Reader or 7-Zip. And an entire list of products that are supported by client management is present on our product documentation page. Another very important feature is the direct access tool, which helps you access the file system of the device, and you could also remotely manage their services, registries, and events, and could take a remote control of these devices as well. Now there are several automations that could be achieved with the help of the operational rule steps. And finally, BMC Client Management is available to install on your on-prem environment and also available in SaaS, which we refer to as Helix Client Management. Administrator can perform different administrative tasks. In BCM, administrator is a main object through which the security is enforced. And each administrator will have a capability list defined for his profile, which will determine his access to different modules in BCM console and the different operations that he could perform. Now, these operations could be assigning devices to a patch group or a patch job, or assigning a transfer window to the devices, or deploying rollouts to the target devices. Any user or administrator that would want to log into the BCM console must be defined as an administrator in the client management database. Now, when the installation of the master happens, two administrators will be created automatically. They are admin account and system account. The admin account user has all the permission and capabilities over all the modules of BCM. That is, it has read, write, delete, and update permission on BCM modules. It cannot be deleted and its capability or access rights cannot be modified. One can only log in with the admin account to perform different tasks and operation on the BCM modules. Next is a system user. A system user is a login that is used by the master server to perform database actions, and we cannot modify its capabilities or reset its password either. Also, the administrator or the user cannot log into the BCM console with the system user account. Furthermore, when an administrator is created, the member of tab will give information about the groups that the administrator belongs to. The shared object feature can be set to enable or disable. When enabled, every other administrator that belongs to the same group will have same permission on objects that are created by this administrator. For example, if a user A that belongs to a group and its share object feature is set to yes, then when this user creates an object, all the other members of the group will also have the same permission over this new object that is created. Now, as the administrator is created manually, the authentication method that is used is internal. That is, this login of the administrator will be authenticated by the master server database. Once a new administrator has been created in BCM console, one will need to configure the security profile in order to define the objects the administrator can see, create, or manage. The security profile is divided into three parts. One is the capabilities, then is the static objects, and the dynamic objects. And all three needs to be configured. Capabilities decide which kind of object a BCM module the administrator can view, manage, assign, populate, and schedule. With static object, one can decide which top node the administrator can view in BCM console. These top nodes could be the device group, operational rules, packages, patch deployment module, or patch job module. The top node could be considered as a directory. That is, only when the top node of the module is visible will the details under it will be visible. For example, when an administrator has view rights on the device group node, only then will he be able to view the sub-device groups under it. But if there is no view permission given to the top node device group, then even if the sub-device group has write permission on it, it will not be visible to the administrator. Dynamic objects will help give dynamic permission to objects in the console, and these permissions could be given via queries or members of folders or device groups. Along with the read, write, and assign access, dynamic objects also help in configuring the permissions required to perform direct access and remote controlling the target devices. With read access, the administrator has the rights to display the object in the console. With write access, the administrator will be able to manipulate the objects. Say for example, create a device, delete or modify the device. With assign access, the administrator will be able to assign the respective objects to another object. Say for example, assigning a transfer window to the target devices or to an operational rule. Direct access feature allows the administrator to access the file system, the registries, the windows, events, the processes of remote devices, and with the file transfer feature, one can transfer files between the local machine and the target device or the remote machine. Now the direct access feature could be set to allow or deny. With the allow option, the administrator will be allowed to access the file system of the end device, and with deny, the administrator will have no access to the file system. That is, the access to the remote device will be denied. The allow option is further bifurcated to required direct access acknowledgement and not required direct access acknowledgement. When set to required, the administrator will need to have the remote user's permission to access his or her device. And if the direct access acknowledgement is set to not required, then the administrator can directly access the remote device and the remote user will not receive any acknowledgement pop-up. The remote control access could also be set to allow or deny. With allow, the administrator can remote into the target device, and with deny, the remote control to the target device will not be possible. Again, for remote control allow access, there are few more options that needs to be configured. If the acknowledgement pop-up for remote control is set to required, then the administrator will need to have the remote user's permission so that he or she could access the target device. If it is set to not required, then the administrator can remote into the target device and no acknowledgement will be received by the end user. There are two more options under it. It's called if session is closed or if the user is absent. If these two options are checked, then the pop-up will not be received by the end user. Now when the session pop-up is enabled, the administrator who has logged into the device will see a pop-up saying that the remote control is in progress, and this pop-up will be seen to the bottom right corner. There is another feature to it that's called allow end session, and if this option is checked, then the administrator will also get an option to close the pop-up that he will see. Now in an organization, we will never have a single administrator administering, but a group of administrators performing different tasks. For example, patching devices. Administrator groups are a way of organizing all existing administrators within your system. We can create static administrator group or dynamic administrator group. With static administrator group, you can assign administrators manually to the admin groups. With dynamic administrator groups, the administrator could be populated with the help of directory server. The benefits of having an administrator group is that we don't need to separately define the permission for individual administrator, but we could instead define the security profile directly for the administrator group, and all the administrators that are added to this group will inherit the same permission. We cannot populate administrator with the help of queries or compliance rule. And there are many predefined administrator groups as well. For example, help desk administrator, inventory administrator, patch administrator, etc. The predefined administrator group will have only the capabilities assigned to them. The static and dynamic permissions are to be added explicitly to their security group. Now I will demo administrator and groups. In this video, we will be creating an administrator account, configure a security profile for it. We would also create a super administrator group with the help of the wizard, and towards the end of the demo video, we'll be configuring a predefined administrator group, that is the help desk admin group. So let's get started. Once you have logged into the BCM console, click on administrator, right click to create a new user. Give it a name and set the password for it. Now the authentication option will be by default set to internal for the users or administrators that are created manually. This means that when this user tries to log into the BCM console, its credentials will be validated against the BCM client management database. Let's try logging into the BCM console to see what permission this user has. So after logging to the console, we see that this user basically cannot see anything. Now the reason why he's not able to see anything is because the security profile for this user is not configured. The security profile would decide the different modules that this user can access and different operations he could perform. So let's go back to the admin console and reconfigure the security profile for this administrator. Browse back to the security profile, and we would configure the security profile for this user in such a way where he has view permissions to view the devices and device groups, and he also is able to manage operational rules and assign operational rules as well. So we double click to configure the permissions. We'll give view permission to device and device groups. Under capabilities, we look for operational rule and give view, manage and assign permission to it. Again, under static object, we could decide which top nodes the administrator would have view to. If the top node, that is the device group or the operational rule, are not visible, the details under it will not be populated. So in order to give the view permission or other permissions to the top nodes, we need to right click on add objects, click on device group. I'm going to go with the default option where we get read, write and assign access. We'll perform the similar step for operational rules as well. And click on OK. Now under dynamic objects, we decide on the details that gets populated under the top nodes. So in order to do that, we will just right click on add result of query. Under out of box and client management database, we'll look for devices, device groups and operational rule. If we want to select more than one option, click on the control key and select them. Click OK. We will go with default option for read, write and assign, but we will set deny option for direct access and remote control. Click on OK. Now we'll try to log into the BCM console with the test2 account and see what are the changes that has taken place. Login. So once you log into the BCM console under device topology, we can see devices being populated. We also see all the different device groups over here and operational rules as well. We could also try assigning an operational rule to see if the security profile is created correctly. So under assign object, we could assign a device. Yeah. So yes, we are able to assign devices as well, and we have successfully configured the security profile for the test user in order to assign operational rule to the devices. We would now try to create the super administrator group with the help of the wizard, and would also add a user to this administrator group. So let's get started. Right click on administrator group, click on security profile creation, check the administrator group option, uncheck directory server, and then go with the default option that says administrator and administrator group with full capability and access right. So basically this super administrator group that will get created, it would have all the permissions to perform all tasks and operations on all the modules in BCM console. Click on next and give it a name. Click on finish. So if you click on security profile, we could see that all permissions are enabled. Similarly under static objects and dynamic objects as well. Now when a user is added to this security group, that user will also inherit the same permission. So let's see Just for click on OK. Click on the security profile for the new user that we have just created. And we can see that all permissions are enabled for this user under static, dynamic, and capabilities. We could further validate the permissions that are given to the test for user by logging into the console again with the test for user. So now after logging into the console with the test for user, we can see that it has permission to everything: operational rules, device groups, device topology, asset discovery, reports, out-of-box reports, everything. So basically, test for user has inherited all the permissions from the super administrator group that it was added to. We will now try to configure the predefined helpdesk administrator group. A helpdesk administrator is someone who will try to remote to the target device to troubleshoot issues related to the system. And in process of doing so, he may also copy files from the target device to the local system. So click on administrator group and go to helpdesk administrator. Once you click on security profile, you will see that the capabilities for the security profile is already been defined. We just need to configure the static object and the dynamic objects as per our needs. So right click, add objects, and as the helpdesk administrator needs access to devices, we will be adding the top node device group under static object and go with the default settings. Similarly, under dynamic objects, we'll be adding devices and device groups. So click on add result of query, out of box, BMC database, and select both all devices and device group. Click on OK. Again, we'll go ahead with the default setting for read, write, and assign permission. But we will be configuring the acknowledgement pop-up for direct access and remote control feature. For direct access, we'll be setting the acknowledgement pop-up to required. That means the administrator will get access to the file system only when the end user acknowledges the request. And we will be setting the acknowledgement pop-up for remote control to not required. That is, this administrator can remote into the target device directly, and the end user will not get an acknowledgement pop-up for the same if he is not present at the target device or if his session is closed. Click on OK. We'll now add a user or an administrator to this group. Once the user is added, click on security profile, and we can see that this user also inherits the same permission as the parent administrator group. We will now validate the access rights by logging into the BCM console as the P2 user. So right click on any online device to check if the direct access feature is working. This is a pop-up that the administrator will see, and only when the target user acknowledges the access to his machine will this administrator get access to his file system. And this is the pop-up that the target user is going to see. We will allow access to the file system. And we can see that under direct access, all the information will get populated. For remote access, we could right click on any of the online devices again. And this is how we get the remote access to the device. The administrator can then log into the device. And this validates that the permission for direct access and remote control has been set correctly for the help desk administrator group. It will, however, be very time consuming for the administrators to manually create users and add them to separate user groups. Therefore, BCM offers a feature where one can integrate BCM master server with the directory server and synchronize administrators and devices that are already existing in the domain environment. Now, benefits of synchronizing administrators and devices via directory server are that the synchronized user information will get auto-populated in BCM. The administrator will save a lot of time because now he doesn't need to manually create users or administrators. All he needs to do is just create and maintain the security profiles of the synchronized administrator group. The AD synchronized users will be able to log into the BCM console with their domain credentials. And once they try to log into the BCM console, they will be authenticated against the Active Directory database. When the administrators are deleted from the Active Directory database, the same information will get deleted from BCM database as well during the next synchronized schedule. And if the password of the Active Directory user expires, he will no longer be allowed or he will no longer be able to log into the BCM console. There are certain prerequisites that needs to be taken care of before we configure the directory server. One of them is configuring the directory server proxy. And this directory server proxy feature is intended to allow authentication against the Active Directory. This proxy server could be a master server, or it could be any other device that has the BCM agent installed on it and is a member of the domain too. And its main purpose is to direct or handle connections to the Active Directory. The different type of directory services that could be configured in BCM are MS Active Directory, which is the most commonly used option. Then is the IBM Domino, then Novel eDirectory, and finally the LDAP server. Now, based on the directory server type that is selected, the other options will also get populated. We will also need to define the credentials that will be used to check access against the Active Directory server. Now, there are two options given here. One is the anonymous access. Checking this option is same as using an authenticated access without specifying a user and password. But this is not a recommended one. The second will be the authenticated access. We would recommend defining and configuring an account that has permission to log into the directory server and also to connect to the organizational unit or the security group that we are planning to synchronize. So in a nutshell, the different prerequisites required to configure directory server in our environment are: the proxy server must be a member of the domain. We need to enable the directory server proxy role on the device that will be acting as the proxy server. We will need to ensure that the directory server is online. The user account that will be used for authenticated access must have permission to log into the directory server and should also be able to connect to the organizational unit or the security group we are trying to synchronize. And finally, the TCP port 389 must be open within the environment. Now I will demo creating directory server and syncing users. In this demo video, we will be configuring the directory server and synchronizing users from Active Directory to BMC console. To configure the directory server, we will need to make sure that the prerequisites are in place. That is, we'll need to make sure that the proxy server is configured, the port 389 is open in the environment, and also make sure if authenticated user with domain permission is added to the credentials module. We have identified this server which will be acting as the proxy server. So under the general tab, right click, click on properties and make sure that the directory server proxy option is enabled. Click OK and click on yes. To make sure that port 389 is open within the environment, open command prompt as an administrator and execute the telnet command. Copy the name of the Active Directory server and type port 389. Hit enter. If you see a blank screen that populates, it confirms that port 389 is open within the environment. Next, browse to credentials and under account credentials, we have already added a domain user that has permission to connect to the Active Directory and also to connect to the security group and user groups that we are planning to synchronize. As the prerequisites are taken care, we could create a directory server. So browse to global setting, directory server, right click to create the directory server, populate the proxy server. The information of the Active Directory server will get automatically populated, and then add the domain user. Click on test connection. Once the test connection is successful, it means that the directory server has integrated with BMC client management server successfully. We could now synchronize users from Active Directory to BCM, and there are two ways to dynamically populate the users. One will be via the wizard. So go to administrator group, right click, click on security profile creation, select administrator group and directory server. You could either go with the first option where we create or configure this administrator group as super administrators, or second option where we configure the security group as per our requirement. We will be going with the first option. Click on next. Browse to the directory server and select the user group that you would like to configure or synchronize. So the name of the administrator group changes to the name of the user group that we have synchronized. Click next and finish. So this is the information that has got populated. Next is where we dynamically add the directory server to a predefined administrator group. So we click on one of the administrator group, click on dynamic population and add the directory server. Browse to the user group of your choice. So I'm going to click internal IT team, click OK, OK, and click on yes. Again, the name of the test2 admin group has changed to the name of the Active Directory user group that we have synchronized. I refresh the page and you will see the users that have populated. We could also schedule the synchronization of the Active Directory with BCM so that in case any new user is added or deleted from the user group, the same reflects under BCM when the next synchronization schedule runs or execute. We will now access the Active Directory server and add a new user to the internal IT user group and schedule a synchronization as well. So this is the internal IT group and these are the members. We are going to add one more member to it. Okay. Click OK. Go back to the master server. We now schedule the synchronization under the internal IT team. So go to dynamic population, directory server, right click, property, scheduler, and The time on this machine is 4:12, so we'll set it for 4:15 p.m. And now we'll wait for the synchronization to run at 4:15 p.m. So it is 4:15. Let's check if the synchronization ran successfully. We'll just refresh the page. And yes, the new user that was added to the internal IT team has reflected successfully under the BCM console. BCM also offers a troubleshooting guide that covers a lot of commonly known issues related to BCM, and this guide could be accessible from our documentation page. Now there are certain common issues that we have seen related to administrator creation or security profile, and the issues related to configuring the directory server, and we would like to share few of those. One of the issues will be where the end user is not able to use the file transfer feature. The main cause of this issue will be where the security profile of the end user is not configured correctly. So we will need to make sure that the manage permission for file transfer feature is enabled under the capabilities tab, and allow permission is given to direct access module under the dynamic object tab. More detailed information is shared in the knowledge article that has been shared in this PPT. Next will be where the administrator is not able to view the reports. Again, the security profile of this administrator is not configured correctly. There are certain permission that needs to be configured under the capabilities, static objects, and the dynamic objects. For more details, we would request you to go through the knowledge article that has been mentioned on this page. Now, issues related to directory server. The most common one that we have seen is where the test connection of the directory server fails with an error, that is an invalid credentials. Now, the cause of this issue is that the domain name that has been mentioned under the credentials, it contains .com or .org. And the solution to this issue is you need to create the credentials without updating the domain name with the extension .com or .local or .org for that matter. For example, if your domain name is BMC 121.local, then we would request you to mention the domain as BCM 121. And finally, the last issue that we would like to share is the directory server failing with impossible to execute the requested action error message. This happens when the directory server module is inactive on the proxy server. So the solution to this issue will be you need to make sure that the directory server proxy module is enabled on that server. If that module is enabled, then we would request you to unload and reload the module, and then re-add the directory server proxy and the credentials as well, and then verify the connection again. If you are planning to raise tickets with the support team on issues related to configuring directory servers or security profile, we would request you all to share the logs and the config file from the respective servers. For Windows and Linux devices, the log locations are a little different, and they are mentioned on this page. Finally, these are some references that covers different topics such as managing administrators, creating administrative groups, security profiles, creating and synchronizing the directory servers, and the port requirements. And finally, in the summary, in this entire webinar, we have covered topics related to creating administrators, administrative groups, assigning security groups or security profiles to these administrators. Then we have also seen the prerequisites to set up the directory server and the ways to synchronize users via the directory server. Over to you, Greg.
Thank you. And now I'll take us through the self-help in contacting BMC. The YouTube channel where this webinar will be posted is listed here. It contains past webinars as well as a rich set of how-to videos. The Connect with BMC Helix ITSM and Remedy webinar schedule is available at this community's link, and the Hot Off the Press newsletter for trending information is available at this community's post. As always, contacting technical support via web, phone, email, and these social channels is available. At this time, that will conclude this webinar. Thank you for attending.